everybody, this is Blake here. I'm reviewing Savages, which is Oliver Stone's newest movie. Now, Oliver Stone is a director that I am pretty wary of, even though I actually like most of his movies. And there's just something about his dialogue that's very stylized, very over the top, that, you know, when it works really well, but when it doesn't, it's really obnoxious and overwritten. And his direction is very energetic, it's very experimental, and it usually works out well, but when it doesn't, it's just also really obnoxious, and I just can't really get into it. So even some movies like Natural Born Killers, I really don't like, even though there's nothing objectively bad about them, I just can't really get into the style. And so with every Oliver Stone movie, even though most of the time they turn out really well, I expect it to suck, because I imagine that one day there's going to be an Oliver Stone movie where all the dialogue and the direction, you could see that it is an Oliver Stone movie, but it's going to completely backfire and suck because of it. Was Savages that movie? Yes and no. I don't think this movie is that awful, but at the same time, you know, I was surprised at how ordinary it is compared to most Oliver Stone movies. And the Oliver Stone traits are actually really fucking annoying. But at the same time, they aren't present enough to really completely sink the picture, at least for me. Because the one thing you have to remember with Oliver Stone's movies is that it's less about what's good or bad and is more about what you like or dislike about them. It's very difficult to be objective with an Oliver Stone movie. But luckily with Savages, you can to a point. Okay, so this film stars Aaron Johnson and Taylor Kitsch, I think that's how you pronounce his last name, as these two drug dealers who happen to share the same girlfriend, played by Blake Lively, whatever her name is. And they catch the attention of this drug cartel, which is operated by Salma Hayek, and they want a partnership, but the two guys decide it's not their style, so they refuse. So in retaliation, the cartel captures the girlfriend and pretty much threatens that, you know, they have to do whatever they say or they're going to kill her. And but they initially go along with it, but decide they're going to take this drug cartel out. And that's pretty much the bulk of the movie. I always suck when it comes to describing plots. But the first act of this film, which is like the first 30 minutes where they're setting everything up, it is fucking unwatchable. I hated this movie at that point. For one, the characters are very flat. The only personality traits that we get from them is what the narration tells us. They try way too hard to make these guys sympathetic, which in a business like that, you can't participate in that kind of business without getting your hands dirty. And I'm talking like really dirty. That's why it's illegal. And as long as drugs are illegal, then yeah, it's going to be just like this. But it's usually okay when the movies are unapologetic about it, like Scarface, American Gangster, whatever. You can take these drug dealers, and they're ruthless, they maybe even monsters, but they do have standards, they have charisma, and they have wit, so we can accept that they are bad people. With this one, it's too apologetic when it comes to its characters. It wants you to really sympathize with them and root for them, but because they're so flat and inconsistent, you really don't. And the girl is even worse because she's such a shallow love interest, and there's nothing redeemable about her. She has no plans for her future. Her only goal in life is pretty much to be with these two people and go shopping. She's a drug addict, and the movie never really calls her out on it for some reason. You know, once she gets taken hostage, you know, she doesn't have access to weed, so she's all messed up through all of that. And there's just nothing sympathetic about her, and she's boring. And that's the worst combination, is I don't like you and you bore me. And the villains are actually more interesting, and in a way this suffers from the Boondock Saints problem, which is everybody in this movie is interesting except the people it wants to follow. But what really kills the opening act isn't that, it's the narration. Oh my god. Blake Lively, she has this voiceover that's just so awful, and it's not really her fault. It's that the dialogue she's spewing out is so bad. And I won't go too much detail on what exactly these lines are, but here is one that you've probably heard by now. I have orgasms. He has wargasms. And she's of course referring to that he's this war veteran who never really was able to, move on after coming back from Iraq. And that's very inconsistent because after that initial scene, you never get any indication that there's any kind of internal conflict going on there. He's just a cold-blooded killer throughout the movie, and for some reason that's supposed to be okay. But the narration, it's one of those cases where the movie thinks that it's being really witty and it's being really smart, but it's not. Now, this could have worked okay if there was a sense of irony about it. Maybe it's supposed to be really stupid and cheesy, and that's the whole gimmick with that character, is that she thinks she's all deep and ponderous when in reality she's just a hack when it comes to this stuff. She has a stoner's wit. If the movie drew attention to that, then it would have been okay, but it's delivered way too seriously, and it's spoken as if this is supposed to be some deep line. And that's pretty much all the dialogue with her. And whenever she showed up, I was probably in a pissed off mood. So after that horrid opening act, the film actually gets better. The second act is actually usually the most difficult one to pull off in a movie because there's no real set of rules for it. It's just characters encountering and confronting, just encountering obstacles and hopefully overcoming them. And but this is also when the movie becomes its most interesting, but at the same time it becomes pretty conventional. And that's usually one thing I never say about Oliver Stone's movies. They're rarely conventional. They're very out of the ordinary, and that's what makes them unique. But in this case, it's just a relatively normal movie, but the characters find themselves in some very edgy situations that, really work. It's pretty brutal, violent, suspenseful, but at the same time, there's nothing about it that really stands out either. It's just at this point, the movie was acceptable. I was interested enough, and I liked the action scenes. I thought they were pretty down to earth and gritty. But I guess I'll take normal and decent over what in the hell that first act was. But then unfortunately when it gets to the third act, it starts fucking up again. The third act in itself is okay. I did like the score, which kind of has this spaghetti western sort of vibe to it. But there's this twist, and I'm not going to spoil it, but it's not only really stupid, it's also incredibly pointless. Now, I could see this twist working under better circumstances where there's an actual context for it, but here it feels like they had to expand the running time a little bit, so let's just add this for no reason whatsoever other than for a cheap shock. But the movie was already, I think, kind of long. I didn't really look at the time, so I'm not even really sure why they bothered, but it's a very, very unnecessary twist that just makes the ending incredibly stupid. That's really all I have to say. So, it's at its best, it's okay, or not even okay, but it's above average, where sometimes it's interesting, but whenever Blake Lively appears, I was rolling my eyes constantly. I hated the voiceover, and the opening act sucked, and the third act was just stupid. And I guess I can just talk about the acting now. Taylor Kitsch, he's been really unlucky lately. He was in John Carter and Battleship, both of which really bombed. Now, I thought he was pretty decent in John Carter, but I never saw him in Battleship, but I heard that he did pretty bad, which is odd because apparently that's the movie that got him this role. But he does pretty good. He's pretty tough, pretty intense and edgy, where I could buy him as a badass. So he deserves a lot of credit for this movie. And then Aaron Johnson, who I actually didn't recognize at first. He was in Kick-Ass, and I believe he was in Forbidden Kingdom. He does really good. That's the only character who really seems to be going through anything, because, the whole gimmick with him is that he's this peace-loving guy who just wants to help people, and he's forced to make some really difficult decisions, so I kind of felt something for that character. The problem was that the movie just started going too far with it, to the point where I just wanted to smack that guy. He was getting really annoying, but at least the actor did really good, and the character was at least sort of developing. He wasn't a complete static character. Now, Blake Lively, everybody's giving her crap, and so have I, but honestly, it's not that her acting was that bad, it's just that the character she played was very annoying and very boring. And but the acting-wise, I'd say Oliver Stone deserves more blame than her, because like that voiceover, that's something he could have easily just told her, lighten up a bit, don't take this so seriously, then we could all take the dialogue with a grain of salt. But unfortunately, she just delivers it with a straight face, even though you don't see her face, obviously. But it's too serious, and that's what really makes her suffer and the performance itself isn't that awful. John Travolta is pretty much playing a typical John Travolta role. He's very over the top, and sometimes that really works, but here it just kind of felt out of place and odd. Benicio del Toro is pretty much playing Benicio del Toro, the same kind of role he actually probably helped popularize. But there's nothing to the character. He's just a total psychopath or sociopath. But Benicio is pretty intense. He's pretty frightening. I was interested in him just because he as an actor is so interesting. It wasn't so much the character. So I liked him a lot, even though, yeah, he's pretty over the top. But in this case, it works better. Salma Hayek, she is really good. I think her performance has sort of been overrated because all she is playing is sort of an evil bitch, but not completely an evil bitch. But at the same time, I felt that this was something she could have easily pulled off. It wasn't that groundbreaking for her, but still, she did a really good job, and the character was sort of interesting. And who else was there? Emil Hirsch? I can't remember if I'm pronouncing that name right either. He's the guy in Speed Racer and Into the Wild. He shows up for some reason. He was fine, I guess. The movie actually does have a pretty big supporting cast, but like one guy is played by that nerdy guy from Avatar, and he's also the main dude in Hatchet. He shows up in the movie, but he doesn't really do anything. I don't even think he maybe had one line of dialogue. And I hear Uma Thurman at one point was in it, but they cut her role out. So this movie may have found itself, a lot of it was probably left on the editing room floor. So, but acting-wise, everybody does fine with what they have, and sometimes they had more to do than others. And that's really all I have to say. As a whole, like I said, I think this is an ordinary movie that sometimes was hijacked by a very bad movie. And but I didn't hate it as much as I thought I would. So the movie varies from really bad to decent. All in all, I'd say it's probably worth a rental just because with Oliver Stone's movies, just because I dislike a certain aspect of it doesn't mean you will. And so I think it's worth watching if you're an Oliver Stone fan or if you like the cast. I don't think it's worth watching in the theaters. Unless it's free, unless you can watch it for free. But otherwise, don't bother until it comes out on DVD. And even then, as a Netflix preferably, don't spend too much money on it. So that's all I have to say. There was no written review. Follow me on Twitter. You can go to my website. The links are all that are in my description. And that's really all I got. So see you guys later.